everyone, Leslie here. Welcome to my channel where I talk about my experiences with art, going through art school, and just some tips and tricks as well as answering some questions. We're going to jump right in here. So this drawing was my final project in a class about a couple semesters ago, 1 or 2 semesters ago. And what it is we had to put together a still life, which you can see in my background there, which it's always best to draw from life. That everyone almost, well, a lot of people say it's best to draw from life. Even the people who do not necessarily practice it. I also do have a photo of this that I use to look at fine details and get really close in to see shapes rather than the overall object, which you'll see me looking over towards the camera from time to time, and that's me looking at the reference photo instead of the actual reference. If you're liking what you're seeing, go ahead and hit subscribe so then that way you can keep up to date with me, as well as the bell notification so then that way you can be notified of new videos when they go up every week. What I'm working on here is the bag that is going to be the focal point. Now, the best way to show a focal point in your drawing is this is where the highest amount of contrast is going to be. And so you have the darkest darks and the whitest whites next to each other within close proximity to each other. Now this bag is also made of satin fabric and has satin thread that's done the detail, and so there's a lot of variation in the color. It makes for a lot of detail, which also will draw someone's attention to it, making it the focal point, which are all reasons why I decided to make this the focal point. Not necessarily because it was in the very front of everything, and certainly not because it was the biggest out of all the things in the still life. It is obviously not the biggest. So what I'm using here is the charcoal pencil 2B and 4B from Generals. I'm using a Mono Zero mechanical eraser for Tombow. And I'm also using a kneaded eraser, and I believe the company that puts that out is Prismacolor. The paper that I'm using is Mi-Tints, and that's Mi-Teint's. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Anyways, the color is flannel gray and the brand name is Canson. And I can put all that down in the description for those who want to look up more about this or want to purchase these items. Now here what I'm doing is working in the shadow shapes. Now what that means is I'm filling in my darkest darks as well as my lighter darks. These are the two shadows that make up the object, and since the bag's satin, there's a lot of variation in these, so it takes me a little while, including having to adjust my easel so I'm not hurting my back bending over towards the bottom of the drawing all the time. You can see at the top there that I've already worked on that this is a drawstring bag with a string over there off to the side of it. And I'm also scowling while I look at my reference photo on the computer. I used the reference photo mostly while I drew the bag, just so then that way I could see all the little variations of colors and I could zoom in and really get a good look at the bag, because this is where the most of my details is going to be, is on this bag right here. So I'm deepening some of the shadows a little bit right there, making sure I'm getting the shape, and then going along and deepening that shadow, making it darker. The highlights on this bag were also very interesting because, you know, were they highlights with the light or were they just a lighter gray? Still working on darkening those shadows. Most of the variation was in the very top of the bag because I do keep the bag drawn, and so it has the most amount of wrinkles and folds, and it also had the lightest light since it's directly underneath the light source. Now here I'm drawing in the cast shadow of the bottle on the cover of the book. And you start to see now how the book is the biggest shape in the still life, but it is certainly not my focal point because it is so plain for how much space it takes up. And there are the cards that go in the bag. They have little faces on the back of the cards, and so I'm just kind of roughly drawing those in, and I'm going to be shading them in just a moment. You can see that the shadow that the cards cast on the book, that's sitting on the surface, there's a darker shadow, and then it leads into a lighter shadow of the book, the hardcover of the book. So what I'm doing here is referred to as sight measuring. And what that is when you hold your pencil up to the still life or the person that you're drawing, and you hold your pencil at the angle of a line, or what you perceive to be a line. And then you move your arm back over to the paper and hold the pencil up to where that line is supposed to go on your paper, and then drag your hand in a straight line. And this is supposed to give you the angle of your still life, but I'm not very good at that, and so I have to tend to check and double check. You saw how many lines I put down before I got it correct, and then I even had to move it further up away from the corner to place it in the right spot. There I am shading in the shadows for the cards as well as on the back of the card. You might be able to see that by my hand at the bottom of the bag, there's a bunch of little like smudges. What those are fingerprints, and that comes from touching the paper. Now, I tend to use blending tools such as paper stumps, so then that way my fingerprints don't get on the paper. And I know there's a lot of people who like to use their finger to blend charcoal or graphite or pastel, but what that does is if you touch a bit of the paper that doesn't have any charcoal or anything yet on it, the oils from your hands will get on the paper, and then you see this dark oily spot. Now if you color over it with pastel or charcoal, the oils on that spot grab even more of the medium, and so then you'll have this dark fingerprint in the middle of your work, which can be very, very upsetting and difficult to try to correct because you have this dark spot that you can't necessarily erase away because the oils just won't let go of the charcoal, and you end up lightening the area all around it, and so it just makes that fingerprint even more noticeable. So now what I'm doing is I have a shield, what I call a shield or like a paper guard up over the area that I've already drawn. And what this does is as I work on another area and my hand maybe will run across the paper, it won't smudge the work that I've already done. It will actually preserve it very well. Now, being right-handed, I tend to work from the left side of the paper to the right, which you can see I'm starting to do. I didn't do it initially as I was blocking in some of the different shapes, but this usually is helpful because then I'm not smudging with my hand, the side of my hand, areas that I've already worked on. And there's other things for this. You know, you can use a maul stick or just draw completely left to right or right to left depending on your hand. But sometimes you need something like that to just help you out. Now I'm going back and I'm working more on the bag. I'm putting in some whites so then that way I can see, oh, there's the Tombow mechanical eraser. It looks like a mechanical pencil. It works pretty much exactly like it, only it's an eraser, and it is great for getting into small areas as well as just some fine details if you're doing erasing. So I've done some white on the bag just so then that way I can see which shadows need to be darker, what areas need to be lighter, and where I'm going to be putting the highlights once I get to a more complete stage of the drawing. Now, one thing that you'll notice is that artists won't leave a large space all one color. There'll be some variation in lights. So it'll be a darker color in one area, and then it'll gradate into a lighter or even another darker color, for somewhere else. And what that does is it just creates some interest, it creates some depth in certain, depending on how it's used. So what I'm doing here is this end of the end of the table that I'm working on in the still life is more directly underneath my light source, and so it's going to be lighter. And then it works into a darker, more in the shadows as it moves away. So that's what I'm filling in here. Some of the shadows, I did the highlights that were closer to the light source. And that's also a paper towel that I'm using to blend out the vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is very nice for blending. The problem is it's really light once you blend it. So you have to keep going over and over and over. And even then, there's only a certain level of darkness that you'll be able to achieve with the vine charcoal. Now, one thing that my teachers always say is that you want to save your white pencil for the very end when you're done with all your shadows. And I can see where this makes sense and this is good practice, but me personally, I obviously do not adhere to this. I may have said this actually, I like to add the white to see what I need to have be darker and what I need to have be lighter. And here I am, I'm just continuing to work on the background, the folded fabric. I'm working the detail, like I said, from left to right, which is my normal practice, so then that way I don't put a lot of detail in one area and then have it get smudged or messed up, and then I'm going back once again. So we'll just about end this here. I'm almost done with my session that I was doing for the first day. Again, hit the subscribe button for more videos like this, and hit the bell notification to be notified when new videos go up each week. And again, thanks for stopping by and checking out my channel.